All right. So hello everyone. And as Arthur said, it's morning here. So good morning if you're located somewhere where it's morning, but also good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might currently be located in the world. My name is Lydia, and I am here to talk with you about your academic transition to Queen's. And some of the resources that are available to you through the Queen's University International Center and Student Academic Success Services. And so we're going to talk a little bit about, Arthur used that word transition. And so we're going to talk about your academic transition today. And I know some of you might be thinking, about lots of other things, and probably not necessarily what's going to be happening in the Queen's classroom just yet. But that's really a big part of your goal in coming here to Queen's. And so it is something that I hope you can spend a little bit of time thinking about over the next month or so before classes get started. And so before we get into talking about that academic transition part, I want to let you know about one of the resources that is available to you on campus, called Student Academic Success Services, or you might hear lots of people refer to it as SAS. And so if you haven't noticed already, at Queen's, there are many, many acronyms. So that's when, right, we take the first letters from words and put them together. So I'm presenting to you from the International Center today. So the Queen's University International Center. So we talk about the QUIC, but I'm going to talk to you about SAS, but I'm sure you've heard so far and will continue to hear many more acronyms throughout your transition to Queen's. But SAS supports all Queen's students with their academic skills development, from writing essays, lab reports, thesis dissertations, and academic articles, but also to things like studying effectively and managing your time well and developing your academic English skills. And so this is available to any student, whether you're coming to Queen's to start an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree. We are here to support you, and we do that through one-on-one appointments. So you can meet one-on-one with someone, and you can meet one-on-one with them in person. You can meet with them online. So even now, as you're getting ready to come to Queen's, you could book an online appointment to start talking about some of these academic skills if you'd like. And then we also offer something called an e-feedback appointment, and that's when you can submit a document for someone to look at and review and provide feedback directly in the document itself. We also offer drop-in sessions all around campus. We have study groups happening at SAS. We have workshops and lots of online resources on our website, which you'll see here on this slide, sas.queensu.ca. And we even have a certificate, which I'll tell you about in a few minutes. But I want to let you know that you don't have to be struggling with your academics to access these services. So we have lots of successful students who want to continue to develop their skills, and they come and they meet with us as well. So we're here to support you if you're struggling, but you don't have to be struggling in order to come and be working on these skills, and to be thinking about and working towards your success here at Queen's. And so, you can help you be successful through all the different stages of your academic journey. And also, just in case you're wondering, there is no additional cost. This is part of the support that's available to you at Queen's, so you don't have to pay anything in order to access these services. So you can use them as much as you'd like, as much as you need. And so we're located, when you do come to campus, we're located in the big library on campus called Stauffer Library, and we're in the first floor there of that library. But as I said, you can also be connecting with us online on our website, where you can also book appointments. All you need is your Queen's email and password, and you can get connected to booking appointments if you would like to. So let's get started talking about what we want to review today. So kind of what we're going to be talking about today are academic transitions. So this change that you're going to experience as you come to Queen's. Academic culture shock. So maybe you might be thinking, and maybe you've experienced before, culture shock. I think we all have to a certain extent. And then we're going to spend some time talking about assumptions and expectations about academic learning here at Queen's that you might experience. And then we'll look at some strategies for that can help you be successful at Queen's. And then you'll also get an opportunity to hear some student experiences as well. And so I mentioned a few moments ago about a certificate program that that Queen's offers through the Quick and SAS. And so this is a certificate that you can also start today if you're interested. It takes 12 hours or less to complete, and it's called the Learning Across Culture Certificate. So the goal of the certificate program is to develop your awareness of academic experiences and expectations in different learning contexts, right? So every context we experience is going to be different. Sometimes it's just a little bit different. Sometimes it's very different. And so some of the expectations you've experienced before in a previous academic experience might be different from what you'll experience at Queen's. And so it can help you build your confidence and develop those skills and strategies that you need to be academically successful at Queen's. And through the certificate, you also get to try out some of the support services that are available to you. And actually attending today's session meets one of the requirements of the certificate. And so if you're interested, the QR code is there. And later on in the Q&A session, I can also put the link to the certificate in the chat if you're interested. So let's talk a little bit about different learning contexts and transitions. So learning experiences, as I've kind of mentioned so far, differ across countries, cultures, communities, schools, disciplines, and classrooms. And so even students who've been studying here in Ontario, in Canada, if they've gone to high school here, they still experience that kind of a bit of a culture shock when they come to Queen's. And so that you might feel that even more if you're coming to Queen's from, a different country where you've been studying in a different culture and different language. You might feel that as well. And so every learning context you encounter will be a bit different, and the differences may seem significant, right? Like engaging in your first learning experience in a new country, or the differences may seem small, like engaging in a new class in your major, right? Because even from class to class, the culture is a little bit different. The expectations are a little bit different. And so change is something external or something outside of yourself that's happening to you. And transition refers to the ways that adjusting to a new environment can affect you as a person. So that transition is happening internally, the internal experience. And so sometimes a new environment can affect the way you think, the way you feel, the way you sense, the way you act. And it's common to experience some stress during these periods of transition. So this stress is related to the challenges of experiencing and understanding a new environment. And sometimes these challenges and stresses can have some negative effects on us psychologically, socially, cognitively. And so it's important to know if you do experience that there's support, right? And we can even be proactive about it. We can know, oh, I'm going to go through this big change. So maybe I'm going to start talking to Student Academic Success Services today. And even by choosing to be here, right? Choosing to come to this session, you're being proactive. You're realizing, I'm going to experience a big change soon. What are some things I need to know? Maybe to make that change a little bit less stressful for me. So while most people entering a new learning environment experience stress, especially when that environment is quite different from where you have previously studied, you bring so many strengths with you that have helped you be successful before, right? You've been through these kinds of transitions and changes before. You've learned and gained all kinds of skills that have gotten you into Queen's, that have gotten to you where you are today. And so now you have to think about those strengths. You may just need to use them in a bit of a different way. And so sometimes it can be helpful to have someone to talk that through with you, and think about, okay, what are the strengths you have and how can we use those to help you be successful now that you're at Queen's? And then you'll also have the opportunity to develop new skills, maybe that you haven't really worked on before. And if you want someone to practice those skills with, Student Academic Success Services is a great place to get to do that. You can come to an appointment and you can practice things with them. But what I want you to do is to take a few minutes to think about maybe some of the assumptions and expectations you've experienced before in other learning experiences. So it can be helpful to reflect on your previous study experiences in order to help you prepare now for a new context. So I want you to do some reflection here. So think about learning experiences you've previously had. What are some of the underlying assumptions and expectations? So underlying, that's kind of referring to, maybe it's not something, that they talk about. If I were to show up, when you think about a school that you were recently attending, maybe it's people go there and they just know, oh, when the teacher comes into the room, everyone's supposed to stand up. Right. And so at Queen's, that's not the case, right? When an instructor enters the room, students are usually sitting around talking, and they're not expected to suddenly be quiet and everyone stand up. But maybe that's an expectation where I know I worked with a student who that was an expectation. And so they were surprised on the first day. They got up and stood up because that was the tradition they were used to, but then nobody else in the classroom did. And so what are some of so there are some questions here on this slide. And I'm curious if you are up for it, if you'd like to put something in the chat. The first question there is, so where you've studied before, so we're not thinking about Queen's right now, where you've studied before, what were some of the assumptions and expectations around a student's daily schedule? So for example, who plans a student's class schedule? Who plans the student's schedule outside of class? Is there someone taking attendance? Is there someone ensuring that, you're doing your assignments, you're doing your readings? And so I don't know if anyone wants to put something in the chat around a student's schedule. I can go through the other questions as you're thinking about it. Think about where you've studied before and what a student's schedule is like. Or interactions with teachers or instructors. How do students participate in class? Are you expected to participate in class and speak and share your ideas and lift up your hand, have discussions with classmates? And what do you call your teachers or your professors or your instructors? How do you address them? Or what about if you're seeking help? What would you do if you needed help with something? Who do you go to? Or is it up to you to figure that out? And then the last question is around demonstrating learning. How do you demonstrate that you've learned course content? What kinds of assignments or tests were required, and how were they graded? So think about that for a few minutes. I'd love if anyone's up for it, to put something in the chat around what have you experienced before? What are the kinds of expectations you've experienced before in academic contexts that you've been a part of? Right, thank you. Guy. So Guy says, I'm used to calling professors and instructors by their first name. which I understand isn't the case. Oh, interesting. So, yeah, in some contexts, right, we might, maybe it's a bit more informal, or maybe that's just the expectation. The instructor wants you to use, or the expectation is that you use their first name. And so, I'm curious if anybody else has that experience, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat. Do you call your instructor by their first name, or do you use another name? Anybody else want to add? I'll answer the question about Queens in a minute. Okay, we have someone else who has the same experience. Someone else said, I used to call sir and all students stand up when the professor enters the classroom. Okay, so similar to the example I was talking about. Okay, sometimes we call them by their second name, so their family name perhaps, and maybe there's a title with it. So Ms. or Miss or Sir, someone said, or at a university, most instructors would could be referred to as doctor because they have their PhD. So yes, we call them by their title and their last name. Someone else said, so there's a range here. And actually at Queen's, you probably will experience all of these things in your time here. And so that's the hard thing. At Queen's, there's not just one rule or one expectations for how we speak with our instructors and refer to our instructors. Some instructors, will use their title, like doctor, and their family name. Or sometimes maybe when an instructor has a more complicated family name, they might use, you can call me Dr. M, and just use that first letter of their family name. I've had a professor who used their first name, Kate. You could just call me Dr. Kate. But then there are also instructors who want you to call them by their first name. And so because there's this range, what will usually happen at the beginning of the semester is an instructor will let you know what they want to be called. And the most respectful thing to do is to follow what they've asked to be called. And so like someone just said in the chat, for me, saying their first name here is considered disrespectful. So we say Miss or Sir. And so that can be uncomfortable, right? When maybe if you come to Queen's and someone an instructor wants you to call them by their first name, that might feel a little bit uncomfortable. But the most respectful thing you can do is to call someone what they have requested for you to be called and said. And so this is just one example, right, of an experience that might feel a little bit different to you. Maybe it might feel the same. Maybe this is what you've experienced before. But it's one of those things that we don't really talk about, right? You come to Queen's and people just kind of expect that you know this when you arrive. Another difference that sometimes students experience is how much participation might occur. Oh, there's one more comment in the chat. In Germany, we are knocking on our tables after the lecture instead of clapping. It is a form of respect or gratefulness for the professor. Oh, interesting. So I would say in the classes I've attended at Queen's, there is no clapping at the end of the lecture. It's just kind of there's a bit of a dismissal at the end, like, okay, thank you for coming today, time's up, and there isn't any kind of clapping at the end in that way, an acknowledgement. But that's a great example of a difference, right? So if I were going to go to Germany, I would have just expected that I would get up and leave the classroom, and would probably be a little surprised when people were knocking on the tables. So yeah, this is just one example. Another example that's maybe different for some students is in a lot of classrooms, there's a lot of participation that is expected. So often instructors want to hear students' opinions and ideas, and so they're expected to speak up in class, they're expected to have discussions in class. And so that if that's something that's new or different for you, that's also something you could practice at Student Academic Success Services. I'll point out one other difference, especially at the undergraduate level. So if you're coming to join Queen's as an undergrad, You'll notice in courses that there are a lot of assignments. So for some of you, your academic experience or your academic expectation might be, oh, in a university course, there'll maybe just be one big final exam and that'll be my whole grade. Or maybe there'll be a test in the middle of the term and a test at the end, or maybe just one big paper due at the end, and that makes up most of your grade. But in a lot of undergraduate classes at Queen's, there's lots of assignments throughout, professors wanting to check to make sure maybe that you've done the readings that have been assigned. And they want to have some evidence of that. And so some students come to Queen's and find, oh, I'm really busy. There's lots of things that I need to do. And it's really important that I go to class and I go to all my classes in order to complete all the assignments and meet the expectations. Oh, and the instructor's expecting I'm going to be speaking up in class, and I want to make sure that I'm there to get my participation grade in some way. So those are just some of the experiences that might be a little bit different than what you've experienced before. But it's helpful to think about, oh, what are the expectations where I've studied before? And then kind of come in and think about what are the expectations here at Queen's, and to have conversations with people. So people at Student Academic Success Services and people here at the Quick would be very good supportive people to have these kinds of conversations with, but also have these conversations with other students that you are connecting with at Queen's. Because that's a great way to start conversation and get connected with others as well. And I wanted to let you know, if you are looking for more, as you're getting ready to come to Queen's, if you are looking for more information and more kind of student experiences at Queen's, we do have a podcast produced by the Quick and SAS called International Voices at Queen's. And so there's probably about 30 episodes now, and a few different seasons. So each seasons of the podcast has a different international student host, and then the guests are either current or former international students. And so it's a great way to get to hear about some of the successes and challenges that students have experienced, and then what they did to overcome some of those challenges or to celebrate those successes. And so that might be helpful for you. So what I want to do is take a few minutes to listen to a conversation between Amir and Safa as they're talking about some of the academic culture shock that they experienced. You might recognize one of the stories there that I referred to earlier in the session today. But what I want you to do, I think it's about 3 minutes. I want you to listen and think about what are some of the different learning expectations that you hear Amir and Safa talk about, and then what are some of the strategies that they share for, acknowledging and understanding these different learning expectations. So just have a listen, and then again, you can put some ideas in the chat and we can talk about them.
But for me, the first thing I realized about this topic at Queen's was that compared to my previous university, academic integrity here has much higher importance. And students should comply with certain amounts of regulations here that were not a big deal at my home country. For instance, students here are not supposed to share the course's notes or recordings with other students if the instructor has not authorized it. However, in my previous university, this was not considered a breach of academic integrity. This used to happen a lot.
I can relate to you. Like back in Egypt, yeah, we used to do it the way you did. Like someone would take the notes and we have them like uploaded somewhere where like the entire class would access the notes and nobody had a problem with that.
Exactly. Or I also knew nothing about self-plagiarism, which is the act of submitting the same piece of work in more than one course without the instructor's permission. So how did these experiences affect your academic experience at Queen's?
Like given the friendliness and like how everything is going, I think it affected everything in a positive way. Like I learned gradually that it's okay to be more friendly with people as long as you're doing your job or doing your part in the situation. You're being a respectful student. You don't have to say it by titles or like sirs or whatever. You have to do it by your own like work and your own like you said, maintaining your integrity and like your level of commitment to the program or to your work is more important than like how you say it or the way you deal with it. You can be as friendly as you're expected to and like as committed as you're expected to as well.
Very well said. So there might be some situations that these problems get in the way of your commitment as a student here. So, what strategies can you suggest to our listeners so that they can adopt to understand and deal with these surprises and shocks?
I think it's important to talk to people, like meeting people at Quick, joining like conversation circles, talking to other people about your expectation, like or about like the expectations of your program, your academic advisor or your program advisor, or grad programs, your grad assistant. What am I expected to do here? Your supervisor in grad studies, what's expected out of me, what's my academic responsibility in this situation.
Well, that's a good suggestion. Have you ever done it yourself?
Yes, definitely. At some points I had to like maybe not in my grad work per se, but like especially in my experience as a TA. When I joined like geological engineering, I had to TA from my first term, so that was a different experience. And I used to talk a lot to Dr. Anne Sherman. She was really helpful. She was the lab coordinator of the department, and I used to talk to her like about what I'm supposed to do in the lab, what's the expectation out of me, how do you do things in a lab environment, how it is supposed to be run in Queens versus how you seen it before, because like it's different even from the syllabus wise, from how the lab is organized, how the students are expecting you to be presentable. So it's good to talk to other people and ask them, okay, I don't know how this should be done. Is it this way or that way?
All right. So Amir and Safa talk about a lot of different expectations and experiences that they've had. And I'm curious if anyone heard anything. I see there's a note there about notes. So they did talk about class notes. And so I think Amir talks about one of the differences is that students can't just share their class notes with whoever they like, or the class notes that even the instructor provides. And so you just have to be a bit careful. So in Canada, the content that an instructor presents is actually considered their property. And so you can't just take your class notes or presentations from class and then post it somewhere online on the internet. Because that's not actually your property. It's one thing if your friend missed class and you have the notes and you can, share your notes like that. But yeah, you don't just want to be posting them somewhere online for everyone to see. And so that's one thing to think about. They talked about plagiarism. They talked about academic integrity. So Amir said that this was something considered maybe more serious, more important than where Amir had studied before. And so yes, academic integrity is very important at Queen's. And so there is, if on the SAS website, and this is something I can share too in our Q&A after, we actually have a online module about academic integrity at Queen's and what does it mean? What are the expectations? And that just might be a helpful thing for you to review. Maybe it's very similar to where you've studied it before, but maybe there are some differences. And so it can be good to be aware of that so that you don't run into any issues with academic integrity. So someone in the chat here, they talked about the importance of speaking to supervisors to gain clarity. Yeah, that's such a good strategy, right? When you're not sure of what maybe the expectations are in a lab, or what your instructor's expectations are for you for this paper or this assignment. Sometimes you might feel like, this is something I just need to figure out myself. but actually having a conversation with someone, your instructors, your lab coordinators, they're here to help and support you. And so having a conversation with them to make sure that you clearly understand the expectations. So like Safa said, what are the expectations of me? What do you expect here? What am I expected to do? What's my responsibility in this situation? Just so that it's clearly laid out can be really, really helpful here at Queen's, in the class, in the lab. Also, if you're looking at getting work experience here on campus or off campus, that's a really important strategy to be able to use in the workplace as well when you have a supervisor and you want to make sure you clearly understand what their expectations are of you. And then someone in the chat wrote, I related to the stricter approach. I am accustomed to the not sharing notes rule and the high academic integrity and self-plagiarism rules. My university penalizes students for breaking those rules. And so yeah, and that self-plagiarism came up, and I don't know if that's something that you're familiar with or not. It's something we do talk about in our academic integrity module. And so self-plagiarism is when you submit the same piece of work. So let's say you're working on an essay in one class and you take that essay and then either in the same semester or in a later semester, you submit the same thing, or a lot of it is similar. And so you might think, what? I can't plagiarize myself. But without the instructor's permission. So you can get permission. You might talk to a professor and say, hey, a couple of semesters ago, I wrote a paper about a similar topic and I want to use some of what I wrote in this paper. Is that okay? And you have that conversation with your professor, then that's okay. But doing it without the professor's knowledge, you could run into an issue around that. There's a question in the chat. So just to be clear, you can share notes with friends if they miss classes, but not post notes on a platform or website, etc. Yes, that's correct. Yes. So it's one thing if your classmates are in the class with you and you want to share your notes, they missed something, they're absent. That is a common thing to do. But yeah, you don't want to take those notes and post them, if everyone is on a shared online group, right? Like a WhatsApp group, for example. You don't know where those notes are going to go after. So you have to be very careful sharing notes from an instructor's course in that way. So if this is helpful, right, to talk about some of these things and to get to hear some of Amir and Safa's experience, you might want to check out more episodes or the full episode. This is just an excerpt from the episode about academic culture shock. They might be helpful for you around academic expectations, but also other expectations. We talk about work experience and finance and housing, and all kinds of things. So I encourage you to check out that podcast. And there's one more question here. What if someone already took a course and has notes of the classes in advance? Could I ask for those notes? So that's a situation where I would encourage you to speak with the instructor. Then that might be a conversation of, is this okay? Because since you're not in the same class in that way.
But for me,
all right, so let's take a look then. Let's talk about, so you heard some strategies for academic success at Queen's around the different academic expectations and assumptions you might experience. So what are some things you can do to set yourself up for success here at Queen's? So one thing we talk about a lot about at SAS is time management. So a 12-week term goes by very quickly, and there can be a lot to balance between the different classes you are taking. And also if you have a part-time job, if you have research, you have grocery shopping and meal prep, you have exercise and sleeping, there's lots of things going on in your life. And then you want to also make sure that your academics are a priority. So at Queen's, the typical expectation is that you will manage your time independently. So this means that you'll need to keep track of all of your commitments in class and outside of class and prioritize those tasks. Decide which things are more important and less important. determining what tasks should get more of your time and attention than others. So it's a great idea to make a weekly schedule to organize your time throughout the week, scheduling your work and time and study time, and also knowing when are you going to socialize and have fun, when are you going to cook, when are you going to sleep. A term calendar can help you see the big picture of the term. So it lets you note important dates, for large assignments and tests and exams. And SAS has templates available on our website for weekly schedules and term calendars, if you want to take a look at those. And there's also an assignment planner tool on the website. So if you've got like a research essay you need to do, you can put in when you're going to start working on it and when you want to end working on it, and it'll give you all the steps involved and give you a schedule for working on it as well. And so that might be something that is helpful for you. Another strategy for success at Queen's is developing your critical thinking skills. So in some academic contexts, memorizing and understanding concepts is integral to your success. And yes, those are still important. However, at Queen's as well, many activities and assignments will require you to move beyond these skills to apply, analyze, evaluate, synthesize, create knowledge. And so these are all critical thinking skills. And most likely you'll also be asked to clearly articulate your opinion and then support it with research or other ideas. And so as you begin to start to review your courses in your semester here, and their assignments and their projects, it might be helpful to check out SAS has an online resource called Common Assignment Terminology. And it can help you understand when a professor uses a word like analyze or evaluate or apply, it can help you understand what those mean in the context of a course, in the context of an assignment. And you can also, if you're looking for help developing these critical thinking skills, Student Academic Success Services having an appointment with us might be very helpful as well. Another helpful strategy, building relationships. So that's not something we've talked a lot about yet, but academic success is about more than just books and research. You want to make connections with people at Queen's. That's an integral part of your academic success as well, and also your personal well-being. When you're connected to others, it's easier to ask questions and get help. But some things to keep in mind: relationships take time. So be patient with yourself and with others. Pursue your interests. So what are you interested in? Knowing what your hobbies are, being self-aware. What are you interested in? That might help you connect with people who have similar interests with you. You might want to connect with people who have similar academic contexts or backgrounds to you, because maybe they've experienced a similar challenge to you, or maybe you can help each other along the way and you can each provide each other with advice as you're working through some of these challenges that you might experience. And another important strategy is asking for help. And so sometimes people might feel like asking for help is going to make people think I don't know things, or I'm not smart enough, I don't have the skills to succeed here. And that's really not the case at Queen's. Seeking help, knowing when to ask for help, how to seek help, and where to get help, these are all very, very important skills for success at Queen's, also for success in the workplace. And so thankfully, Queen's has lots and lots of help for you. And so there's lots of places to access help. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. You don't know which place is the right place to get help. But finding someone, Quick is a great place to start if you're an international student. They can help you get connected to the resources that might be specifically helpful in your situation. But when it comes to academic success and needing academic support, Student Academic Success Services is, your go-to service on campus for academic help. As I mentioned, it's free to all students, and you don't have to be struggling in order to access it. Good academics are consistently engaging in the process of developing their skills, right? So the most successful people are continuing to develop their skills. And all of the resources I've referred to today are available on the SAS website. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there's also workshops and one-on-one appointments to get you to support. And so if we were talking earlier about making a weekly schedule or a term schedule, you can make an appointment with someone in SAS to go over that process with you and to check in with you to see how that's going for you. Reach out to your instructors, to your teaching assistants. The syllabus for each course will provide a method for contacting your instructor or your teaching assistant. And instructors also have office hours where you can meet with them and ask questions and get support as well. And then if you're a grad student, there's peer support and professional development opportunities as well. Arthur, who introduced us today, is an international student advisor at the Quick. He is also a great resource for you if you have questions and are looking for certain places to get support. I want to quickly, before we end today, look at some examples of students and maybe the experiences that they've had, and think about, with the knowledge you have, what do you think you might recommend for these students? So I have 2 student examples. And so these aren't real students, they're just example students, but the kinds of issues they're facing are common things that I've heard from students. And so it might be helpful for you to think about. So our first example student is called Sujin. Sujin has dedicated a lot of time in her first semester at Queen's, memorizing the information presented on her professor's PowerPoint slides and the content from the course readings. However, in her weekly assignments, she keeps receiving feedback that her responses lack application and connections to other concepts and ideas. So I'm curious, based on maybe some of the things we talked about before, what do you think is going on for Sujin? And what would you maybe recommend for Sujin to get some help or support in her situation? If you have any ideas, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Okay, so we have one comment in the chat. Maybe she's dealing with the written concepts rather than analyzing the things. That's interesting that you're using that word analyze. A few moments ago, we were talking about these critical thinking skills, right? And so in maybe some of our previous study experiences, if we memorize the information, that's what we need to do to be successful on the test. And the test is the most important thing in the course. But here it sounds like Sujin's instructor wants her to do more than just memorize the information. Maybe she needs to do some analysis, like you said, Dilpreet, analysis of this information, of this content, so that she can engage in a bit more critical thinking. And so, because one of the comments that she keeps getting is that her responses lack application and connections to other concepts and ideas. So this is an important thing in critical thinking, is that you can, read something or hear an idea, and then you can make a connection to something else you've learned in the course, something else the instructor has talked about before, something else you've read about for this course. And so being able to make connections, to create links between ideas, yes, that is a really important part of critical thinking. And so but probably Susan's instructor doesn't specifically say, you know, you need to use these critical thinking ideas. This is what you need to do. A lot of the times those expectations are just, they're kind of hidden. And so sometimes just having a conversation with someone like at Student Academic Success Service, or maybe having a meeting with her instructor during their office hours might be really helpful for just making Sujin realize, oh, that's what you want me to do? I can do that. Or maybe, oh, that's a new thing for me. I need to practice that skill and get used to it. Someone else in the chat said, I think that she should try to apply what she learned in other situations besides what she watched in the class. Yeah, so what's happening? What are some connections to things going on for outside of class? And someone else said she needs to not only analyze the information, but maybe present solutions. Good. Yeah. So that's kind of, if you're doing a bit of an analysis of a problem and then applying solutions. Great. Okay. I've got one other student example that I want you to think about. So we've got a student here called Rue. And in Rue's previous academic context, they did not attend classes regularly at university. So classes would happen, classes were scheduled, but Rue didn't feel like they needed to attend. Their experience was that the class time simply repeated what was already in the course textbook. They would rather spend their time doing other things and then read and study right before the final exam. And actually, over the last few weeks, they've been spending most of their time sleeping and not leaving their room in residence. So what do you think's going on for Rue? And do you have any ideas of how Rue could get some support, or what kind of support Rue might need? Okay, so someone said, so not being serious towards lecture, maybe because of previous classroom experience. So as it says at the beginning here, right? In Rue's previous experience, it wasn't important to go to class. You could just kind of show up at the end, and if you read the textbook, you could write the exam and you would be okay. And someone else says, I think he's losing out on the discussions that appear in classes. Yeah, so Rue, in the context at Queen's, probably there's some important discussions happening in class that they might be listening out on. And so someone else said, what is stated in the textbook can actually be explained easier than reading by professors, which is a win in my opinion, because textbook can sometimes be harder to understand in terms of difficult concepts. Yeah, right. So pairing the textbook with the interactions you get with your instructors and maybe your classmates, if there's time for everyone to be sharing and talking about these contexts, that means you're accessing the information in many different ways, which is going to help you understand it better. It takes more time, but probably that information is going to stick. And so here for me, Rue, as some of you have mentioned, they're kind of going back on what they've experienced before and thinking that the same things expected here at Queen's, and maybe don't realize, as one of you mentioned, what they might be missing out on in the class. And then one other person mentioned just now in the chat, encouraged to access mental health support because they've been withdrawing by not leaving their room, and this might be affecting their academic performance. And that is such a good point, right? So here at the end, it says, over the last few weeks, they've been spending most of their time sleeping and not leaving their room. And to me, yeah, that sounds a little bit like maybe they're having some challenging feelings right now about being here. At the beginning of our session today, we talked about change and transition, and and how sometimes it can affect us negatively. Right? So psychologically, sometimes it can, or emotionally, it can affect us negatively. And we might not exactly realize it until maybe we've gotten to the point that, yeah, we don't really feel like leaving our room. We don't really, we're not really talking to people. And so to me, yeah, at Queen's, there's some great wellness support here on campus. And
Ding.
maybe Rue
So that's why
could,
that I can gotta be, yeah.
oh, so
She's
someone's
reading
just
like
got
that.
their,
Like but she's saying, hey, can you please?
thanks. So yeah, sometimes that just getting some access or accessing some support, such as student wellness services here on campus, coming to the Quick and talking to our advisors here, this might be really helpful for Rue. And then trying to understand maybe some of, because sometimes culture shock can be hard to unpack on your own. It can be really helpful to talk about it with other people. And then a couple other comments, readings in class, not only read the textbook, but also learn about the professor's experience. Yeah, so learning from the experience of the instructor, as we talked about, and also your classmates, and maintaining your academic integrity in all ways is crucial to be successful overall. Yeah, kind of going back to what Safa said, right? Of kind of showing your respect is not about just titles, right, that you use with your instructors. It's also the choices you make with your time and showing up to class and showing up having, done the readings or done your assignments. That's another way that we show respect in our learning environments too. And so thinking through that. But it does really sound like Rue needs someone to talk to, and maybe it's just understanding the expectations and things that are different. And so like we talked about as well, this seeking help, asking for help, knowing where to go for help is a really, really important skill as a student. And so a great place to start with that is here at the Queen's University International Center. So just before we move into a Q&A, I want to remind you about our podcast, the International Voices at Queen's podcast. If you didn't know about it, it's a great thing to be listening to over the next few months as you're getting ready to come to Queen's and as you start at Queen's. And it might just help you understand some of those underlying assumptions and expectations about your experiences here at Queen's and maybe in Kingston and in Canada as well. And then, as I mentioned, we have this certificate program, the Learning Across Culture Certificate. So you can register for this and you can start completing it now. You can probably complete most of it before even arriving at Queen's, if that would be interesting to you. It takes about no more than 10 or 12 hours to complete. And we cover topics like academic writing and academic integrity, lots of things we talked about today. And attending your session today is actually meeting one of those requirements where we have a session or a module about academic learning. So you can check that off if you are interested in this certificate. So that's everything I have for you today. Very happy to stay on here and answer any questions that you might have about what we talked about today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.